This is the Google Pixel 6a, one of the best mid-range phones on the market in 2022. In fact, this was one of the best values in any phone ever. It had the same Google Tensor chip as the Pixel 6 Pro, the same camera as the Pixel 5 but with the image processing of the 6 Pro, the same software features as the 6 Pro, a great 6.1-inch display, which was also OLED, a large enough battery, and most importantly, a starting price of just $449, which is now down to only $300 to $350. So you're all probably wondering, how could Google make it even better with the 7a? Well, you don't have to wonder anymore because pretty much every single detail about the Pixel 7a has now been leaked. And here's what it looks like. Right off the bat, you can probably tell that the back of it now looks part of the Pixel 7 family, with the camera strip being made out of metal rather than glass, which is great as the Pixel 6a had this very obvious separation line between the camera and the glass strip that gave it a very cheap feel. That will no longer be an issue with the 7a. Taking a look at the front, we can see that the bezels are just as thick as they were on the 6a, meaning that while the back almost perfectly resembles the Pixel 7 now, the front will indeed be a notable downgrade. Now, the credibility of these leaked photos is reinforced by these renders revealed by OnLeaks, which, as you probably know, has an outstanding track record. He's also mentioned two colors for the Pixel 7a, white and dark gray. So yeah, that's the Pixel 7a's design. But what about the insides? Well, according to 9to5Google, just like its larger siblings, the 7 and the 7 Pro, the Pixel 7a would also now be using the new Google Tensor 2 chip. This would give it about a 20% boost in multi-core performance, and most importantly, enable features such as faster image processing, real-time audio transcription in the messaging app, and photo unblur. I personally never used the Google messaging app, but I did actually use photo unblur a few times on a few older photos, and it worked surprisingly well, so I'm quite glad to see the Pixel 7a also getting these features. Now, aside from the Tensor 2 chip, there are a couple of more upgrades that have been reported. For example, wireless charging is said to finally be coming. This is something that the Pixel 6a lacked entirely, albeit the 7a will only have a fairly slow version at 5 watts compared to the 20 watts that we have on the Pixel 7. But probably the biggest upgrade would be in terms of the display. You see, a lot of people complained that the Pixel 6a only came with a 60Hz panel. Well, according to this leaked pre-production unit, it seems like the 7a would now be getting a 90Hz panel, basically matching that of the regular 7s. Now, the weird thing is when it comes to the camera. You see, unlike the Pixel 6 and 6 Pro, which used a brand new 50-megapixel sensor, the 6a actually used the same 12-megapixel sensor that Google had been using for the Pixel 2, Pixel 3, 4, and 5. So yeah, this was truly an outdated sensor, but one that Google had managed to optimize heavily over the years. But the year is 2023 now, so it wouldn't really make a lot of sense for Google to still be using a 6-year-old camera sensor. But if they don't use that, what could they use? Well, according to 9to5Google, they could be using the same 50-megapixel sensor as on the Pixel 7 and 7 Pro. But personally, I just don't buy this. Like, having that 50-megapixel sensor would simply blur the line between the 7a and the 7 even more, and literally no one would pay extra for the 7, which at that point, its only advantages would be the faster wireless charging and the, thinner bezels. But that would be it. So even though the lineup would be more streamlined by Google using that 50-megapixel sensor, I would personally put my money on something different. And this is exactly what GSM Arena has been told as well, with Google now said to be using a 64-megapixel sensor from Sony instead, the IMX787. Now, a quick search showed me that the IMX787 is actually not an old sensor, but in fact, a brand new sensor made for flagship phones. One with a sensor size of 1/1.3 inches, which is actually a tiny bit larger than the 1/1.31 inches that Google is using on the Pixel 7 and 7 Pro. And there are multiple sources reporting the exact same thing, so it seems like this could indeed happen. But I just can't believe that Google would put a better, a newer, and also a higher resolution sensor in their lowest end Pixel. That wouldn't make any sense. Or would it? You see, the Pixel 6a was not released alongside the 6s. In fact, it was released 7 months later in May. So it is quite safe to assume that the Pixel 7a would also be released about 7 months or so after the Pixel 7s. which would also be in May, likely at Google I/O on the 10th of May. Which means that by the time the Pixel 7a releases, the Pixel 8's launch would only be about 5 months away. So when that happens, you wouldn't necessarily be picking between the Pixel 7a, the 7 and the 7 Pro, but instead you would be picking between the 7a, the 8, and the 8 Pro. And considering that Google hasn't updated the camera since the Pixel 6, I would definitely put my money on a big camera upgrade coming with the Pixel 8 and the 8 Pro, meaning that this 64 megapixel sensor inside the 7a would then likely be inferior to what the Pixel 8 and 8 Pro would have. But okay, there's still gonna be about 5 months or so between the launch of the 7a and the launch of the 8, so in this case, you're now probably wondering, what's even the point in getting the Pixel 7? Well, it fully depends on the price. If Google somehow keeps the same $450 price point for the 7a, then paying $600 for the 7 would get you a worse camera, thinner bezels, a slightly larger 6.3-inch display as opposed to 6.1, and much faster wireless charging, which I think is actually the only major difference between these two phones. And that is if Google keeps the same price. Given all the upgrades that we've talked about, I wouldn't be surprised if Google bumps the price of the 7a even more, making the regular 7 an even worse deal than it would already be. The thing is that even if we were to look at the lineup once the Pixel 8 launches, there would still be very little reason to get the 8 over the 7a, no matter how big the upgrades of the 8 actually are. As at $450, the 7a would offer everything that a regular person would need from a phone and more. So I think that the only way for the 7a to avoid just cannibalizing the entire Pixel lineup is by reconsidering the lineup itself. Google's most expensive Pixel, the 7 Pro, costs $900, or even less if you find it on offer. Samsung's Galaxy S23 Ultra starts from $1,200, so Google still has plenty of room to play with in terms of pricing. So they could rethink the whole lineup by calling the 8 Pro the 8 Ultra, something that Samsung already does and something that Apple is rumored to do with the iPhone 15, and then have the standard 8 be the 8 Pro, of course with some added extra features and a slight price increase, and then have the 7a simply just be the 8. I think this would make way more sense. It would help differentiate the lineup more, it would help improve the consistency in naming and release dates, while also helping sell the base and the Ultra models way more. If they don't do this, then the 7a would simply just be too good to be true, and there will be very little left for the 7 or even the 8 to stand out. But regardless of what Google does with their lineup, 3 things are clear. Number 1, the Pixel 6a is already an amazing phone, and if you're looking for an outstanding mid-ranger right now, this is it. 2, the 7a, based on those leaked features, will cannibalize the sales of the 8 when that's released. And 3, the release of the 7a and the 8 series would cause the price of the regular 7 to drop. In which case, I just think you should get the 7 instead of the 7a. But I would love to hear your thoughts. What would you like Google to do with their lineup and pricing? And would you say there's even a point in the Pixel 8 and 7 existing when the 7a would be so good? Speaking of good, if you want to find some good deals on the 7 and the 6a, I've left those linked in the YouTube shoppable cards down below. I'm Daniel, this is ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.